I didn't receive a single call from my son. He only showed up when he needed something. The retirement community in Scottsdale wasn't what I had imagined for my golden years. Don't get me wrong. Desert Palms had everything a 65-year-old woman could want. A swimming pool that sparkled under the Arizona sun, weekly bingo nights, and neighbors who'd lived enough life to know when to talk and when silence was a gift. But it wasn't the two-story colonial in Massachusetts, where I'd raised my family, where the maple trees turned brilliant shades of red and gold each fall, where my late husband, James, and I had planned to grow old together. James had been gone 5 years now. Pancreatic cancer. Quick and brutal, leaving me with an emptiness that still ached on quiet nights when the desert wind whispered against my windows. He'd been the practical one, making sure we had savings, investments, and the foresight to purchase long-term care insurance when we were in our 50s. "Just in case, Margaret," he'd said. "We need to be prepared." I'd rolled my eyes then, thinking we'd have decades more together. How wrong I'd been. My phone lay silent on the kitchen counter as I sipped my morning coffee, the Arizona sun already heating up the day, though it was barely 8 a.m. The screen showed no missed calls, no text messages. I wasn't surprised. My son Michael hadn't called in 3 months, not even on my birthday last week. My daughter-in-law Lisa occasionally sent photos of my grandchildren, Emma and Jack, through a family sharing app, but even those had become less frequent. They're busy, I told myself, running a finger around the rim of my coffee mug. Michael's law firm keeps him working 60-hour weeks, and the kids have their activities. Yet even as the words left my lips, I knew I was making excuses for him, for them. The truth was harder to swallow than the cooling coffee. They'd simply moved on with their lives. And I had become an afterthought, someone to remember on major holidays, if their schedule permitted. I rinsed my mug in the sink and gazed out the window at the carefully landscaped desert garden. A hummingbird hovered near a prickly pear cactus, its wings a blur of motion. Life goes on, I thought. On, even when it feels like yours has stopped. The unexpected ring of my cell phone startled me so much I nearly dropped the mug. Michael's name flashed on the screen, as if my thoughts had somehow summoned him. "Michael," I answered, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. "Mom," he said, and something in his tone immediately put me on alert. Not the warm greeting of a son who missed his mother, but the carefully modulated voice he used in difficult situations. I'd heard it when he told me about James's diagnosis. "How are you?" "I'm fine," I said automatically. "Is everything okay? The kids? Lisa?" "Everyone's fine," he assured me quickly. "Listen, Mom, I've been meaning to call." 3 months of silence, and he'd been meaning to call. I bit back the hurt. "And I was thinking maybe I could come visit next weekend if that works for you." My heart leapt despite myself. Michael hadn't visited since I'd moved to Arizona 2 years ago. We'd always met at his home in Chicago when I flew in for the holidays. "Of course," I said, trying to sound casual. "I'd love to see you. Is Lisa coming? The children?" A pause. "No, just me. Lisa's got a charity event, and the kids have school activities. But I thought it would be good for us to have some time together. Just the two of us. Just the two of us." When was the last time that had happened? Not since James's funeral, I realized. "That would be lovely," I said, already mentally planning what groceries to buy, which sheets to put on the guest bed. "The guest room is all ready. Just let me know what time your flight gets in. And I'll pick you up." "Actually, I'll rent a car," he said. "Don't want to put you out." "It's no trouble." "Mom, really, it's better this way. I might have some meetings while I'm there." Meetings in Scottsdale, when he was supposedly coming to visit me. "Of course," I said, the familiar disappointment settling in my chest. "Whatever works best." After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen staring at the phone. Something was off. Michael never took time away from work or family without a compelling reason. And while I desperately wanted to believe that reconnecting with his aging mother was reason enough, experience had taught me otherwise. I tried to push away the nagging feeling as I went about my day. A water aerobics class at the community center, lunch with my friend Eleanor from 2 doors down, a trip to the supermarket to stock up on Michael's favorite foods. But the feeling persisted, a shadow lurking at the edge of my consciousness. That evening, as I sat on my small patio watching the sunset paint the desert sky in shades of pink and orange, my phone pinged with a text message. Not from Michael, but from Diane, my daughter-in-law's mother. We weren't close, but we'd developed a cordial relationship over the years, bonding over grandchildren and the shared experience of watching our children navigate adulthood. Margaret, hope you're enjoying Arizona. Quick question. Did Michael mention anything to you about financial difficulties? Lisa seemed concerned when we spoke yesterday, but changed the subject when I asked. Just wondering if you knew anything. Hope all is well. I read the message twice, my stomach tightening. Financial difficulties? Michael's law firm was one of the most prestigious in Chicago. They lived in a beautiful home in Highland Park, sent the children to private school, took lavish vacations. Just last Christmas, he casually mentioned purchasing a vacation property in Michigan. I typed back a careful response. Hello, Diane. Michael hasn't mentioned anything to me. He's actually coming to visit next weekend, which is a surprise. If I learn anything, I'll let you know if appropriate. Hope you're well, too. I set my phone down, the nagging feeling now a full-blown alarm. Michael was coming to see me after years of absence, possibly facing financial problems, and hadn't brought his family. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't want to see. Don't jump to conclusions, I murmured to myself as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the mountains. He's your son, give him the benefit of the doubt. But as darkness settled over the desert, I couldn't shake the feeling that Michael's sudden desire to reconnect had nothing to do with familial love and everything to do with something else entirely. And whatever it was, I suspected I wouldn't like it one bit. The week crawled by, each day stretching endlessly as I waited for Michael's arrival. I cleaned my already immaculate home, prepared his favorite childhood meals to freeze for his visit, and even splurged on a haircut and color at the salon in town. My son is visiting, I told Maria, my hairstylist of 2 years, trying to keep the nervousness from my voice. That's wonderful. Margaret, from Chicago, right? Is this his first time seeing your place? I nodded, watching in the mirror as she expertly trimmed my silver blonde hair. Yes, he's been busy with work, you know. Maria met my eyes in the mirror, something like sympathy in her gaze. She had heard enough of my stories over the years to know that busy with work was my standard explanation for Michael's absence. Well, he'll love what you've done with the place. And you look beautiful. He'll be so proud to have such a stylish mom. I managed to smile, but her words stirred something uncomfortable in me. Why should I care if Michael was proud of me? Shouldn't it be the other way around? Wasn't I the one who had raised him? Supported his dreams, celebrated his accomplishments? When had I started measuring my worth by his approval? Friday morning dawned clear and mild, a perfect Arizona spring day. Michael's text said he'd landed safely and would arrive at my house around noon. I puttered nervously, adjusting throw pillows. Checking the guest room one more time, brewing fresh coffee, though I knew it would be stale by the time he arrived. At 12:15, a sleek black rental car pulled into my driveway. I watched through the front window as Michael emerged, taller than I remembered, his dark hair showing hints of gray at the temples. He wore an expensive-looking casual shirt and designer sunglasses, every inch the successful attorney. My heart swelled with love and pride despite my misgivings. I opened the door before he could knock. Michael. "Mom." He hugged me, a brief embrace that smelled of unfamiliar cologne. Pulling back, he studied me. "You look great. Arizona agrees with you." "Thank you. Come in, come in. How was your flight?" He followed me inside, his eyes scanning the modest living room with its southwestern decor. "Fine. Direct flight. No delays. Are you hungry? I can make lunch, or we could go out." "Lunch would be great." He set his overnight bag down by the couch. "Nice place, Mom. Cozy." Cozy. The polite word for small. I pushed away the sting. It suits me. The maintenance-free living is a blessing at my age. We made awkward small talk through a lunch of chicken salad sandwiches and fresh fruit. Michael told me about Emma's soccer achievements and Jack's interest in robotics, about Lisa's involvement with a children's charity, about a high-profile case his firm had recently won. I nodded and asked appropriate questions, all while watching him carefully. He seemed tense, his smile not quite reaching his eyes, his fingers tapping restlessly against his water glass. Finally, as I cleared our plates, he said, "Mom, I wanted to talk to you about something important." Here it comes, I thought, setting the dishes in the sink with deliberate care. "Of course, dear. What is it?" He gestured toward the living room. "Let's sit down." I followed him, settling into my favorite armchair while he perched on the edge of the sofa, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. A posture I recognized from his father. James had sat exactly that way when he had something difficult to discuss. "Mom, I've been looking over your finances." I blinked, thrown by the unexpected opening. "My finances? Why would you be looking at my finances?" He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "As your son and only child, I feel responsible for making sure you're secure. Dad left me as the executor of his estate, and I've been monitoring the investments." This was news to me. James had indeed named Michael as executor, but as far as I knew, all estate matters had been settled years ago. And while Michael had helped me set up automatic payments for my bills after James died, he certainly didn't have any ongoing role in managing my money. "Michael, I appreciate your concern, but my finances are fine. James left me well provided for, and the sale of the house in Massachusetts gave me additional security." I kept my voice gentle but firm. "I'm quite capable of managing my own affairs." He nodded quickly. "Of course you are, Mom. I didn't mean to imply otherwise, it's just that—" He hesitated, then plunged ahead. "I've been reviewing some investment opportunities that could really benefit both of us, especially you, with retirement and potential long-term care needs to consider." "Both of us?" I repeated slowly. "Yes. There's a real estate development opportunity in Chicago. Exclusive, high-end condominiums in the West Loop. My firm represents the developer, and they're offering friends and family a chance to get in on the ground floor. It's a guaranteed return of at least 15% within 3 years." I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "You want me to invest in a condominium development?" "Not just any development, Mom. This is prime real estate in one of the hottest neighborhoods in Chicago. They're practically selling units before they break ground." His eyes lit up with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen since he was a boy showing me his science fair project. "I've already put in for 2 units myself." "I see. I didn't, not really, but I needed time to think. And how much would this investment require?" He named a figure that made my breath catch. Nearly half of my remaining liquid assets, not counting my retirement accounts. "That's a significant amount." "Michael, I know it sounds like a lot," he said quickly, leaning forward. "But think of it this way. It's an investment in your future and in our family's future. The returns could supplement your retirement income, and eventually, it would be something valuable to leave to Emma and Jack." The mention of my grandchildren felt calculated, a deliberate tug on my heartstrings. I folded my hands in my lap to keep them from trembling. I'd need to think about this, consult with my financial advisor. James had insisted I maintain a relationship with a financial planner after his death, one of the many ways he'd tried to protect me. Michael's face flickered with something. Annoyance? Impatience? Of course, but I don't want you to miss this opportunity. The investment window closes next week. Next week? I raised an eyebrow. That doesn't give me much time to consider such a large investment. That's why I came in person. Mom, I knew this would be a big decision and I wanted to explain it to you face to face. He reached out, placing his hand over mine. I wouldn't suggest this if I didn't believe it was a great opportunity. I want what's best for you. His hand was warm over mine, familiar yet strange. This was my son, my only child, the little boy who'd once brought me dandelions from the yard, the teenager who'd stubbornly insisted on wearing a tie to his first day of high school, the proud young man who'd introduced me to Lisa with hopeful eyes. I wanted so badly to believe that his concern was genuine, that this visit wasn't just about getting access to my savings. Let me show you the prospectus, he said, reaching for his bag and pulling out a glossy folder. You can see the renderings of the building, the floor plans, the projected returns. For the next hour, Michael walked me through the investment opportunity, his voice animated as he pointed out features and amenities of the proposed development. The materials were impressive, I had to admit. Everything looked legitimate and professional, but something still felt off. Who else is investing? I asked during a pause in his presentation. He hesitated. Several partners from my firm, some clients, a few family members. Lisa's parents? I kept my tone casual. His eyes flickered away from mine. They're considering it a lie. I was sure of it. Diane's text message about financial concerns came back to me, and suddenly things began to make more sense. If Michael and Lisa were having money problems, a failed investment could be the cause. And now he was trying to recoup his losses by bringing in more investors, including his mother. I need time to think about this, Michael. I closed the folder and handed it back to him. And I'd like to discuss it with Brandon. Brandon Wong, my financial advisor. Michael took the folder, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. Of course. But Brandon isn't a real estate expert, Mom. This kind of opportunity isn't really his area of expertise. Nevertheless, I'd value his opinion. I stood up, signaling an end to the discussion. Now, why don't we talk about something else? Tell me more about the children. How is Emma doing with her piano lessons? The rest of the day passed in strained conversation. We went out to dinner at a local restaurant I'd been wanting to try. And Michael dutifully accompanied me on a brief tour of the retirement community's facilities. He made appropriate comments about the amenities and met a few of my neighbors with professional charm, but I could tell his mind was elsewhere. Every few minutes, he checked his phone, frowning slightly at whatever he saw there. That night, after Michael had retired to the guest room, I sat alone in my darkened living room, watching the moon cast silver light over the desert landscape. My mind was a tangle of emotions. Love for my son warring with suspicion of his motives, hurt at his long absence competing with anger at his presumption. I pulled out my own phone and sent a text to Eleanor. Are you free for coffee tomorrow morning? Early, around 7? Need your advice. Eleanor had been a financial consultant before retirement. More importantly, she had no emotional attachment to Michael and would give me an unvarnished opinion. Her reply came almost immediately. 7 a.m. at my place. Bring that coffee cake from yesterday and we'll talk. I went to bed, but sleep eluded me. In the darkness, I found myself remembering Michael as a child, his infectious laugh, his serious questions, his fierce hugs. When had that boy become this man who only called when he wanted something? Where had I gone wrong? No, I told myself firmly. This isn't about my failings as a mother. This is about Michael's choices as an adult. The next morning I slipped out early, leaving a note for Michael saying I'd gone to have coffee with a neighbor and would be back soon. Eleanor was waiting on her patio, 2 coffee mugs ready, her shrewd eyes taking in my tired face immediately. "Rough night?" she asked as I set down the coffee cake. "You could say that." I sank into a chair across from her and gave her a condensed version of Michael's visit and investment proposal. Eleanor listened without interrupting, her expression growing more troubled as I spoke. When I finished, she sighed deeply. "Margaret, I don't like the sound of this. Urgent investment opportunities with friends and family discounts are classic pressure tactics. And the timing, his first visit in years, and it happens to coincide with an investment deadline. Too convenient." "That's what I thought," I said, my stomach sinking despite having anticipated her response. "But he's my son, Eleanor. Why would he try to take advantage of me?" She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. People do desperate things when they're in financial trouble. And sometimes they rationalize it, tell themselves they're actually helping the person they're borrowing from, that they'll pay it back with interest, that it's not really wrong because it's family. You think he's in trouble? Based on what you've told me, and that text from his mother-in-law? Yes, I do. The question is, how deep is he in? And what's he not telling you? I stared down at my untouched coffee. What should I do? First, absolutely call your financial advisor. Today, if possible. Second, she hesitated. This might be difficult, but I think you need to do some digging. If Michael has access to any of your accounts, even just to monitor them as he claimed, you should change your passwords immediately. Check your credit report. And maybe see what you can find out about this development. If it's legitimate, there should be public records, news articles, permit applications filed with the city. The suggestion that I should investigate my own son felt terrible, a betrayal of the trust that should exist between parent and child. But hadn't he already betrayed that trust by coming to me with an investment scheme rather than an honest conversation? "I hate this," I whispered. "I hate that I can't just trust him." "I know," Eleanor said gently, "but trust has to be earned, Margaret, even from our children." I returned to my house to find Michael already dressed and on his laptop at my dining table. He glanced up when I entered. "Morning, Mom. Where'd you go so early?" "Coffee with my neighbor, Eleanor. I mentioned last night that we had plans." I hadn't, but the small lie came easily. "Have you eaten? I can make breakfast." "Just coffee for me, thanks." He gestured to the mug beside his computer. "I've been doing some work. Actually, I need to go into Phoenix for a meeting this afternoon. Something came up unexpectedly." A meeting on Saturday, in a city where his law firm had no offices. Another lie, I was almost certain. "That's fine," I said, moving to the kitchen to pour myself a fresh cup of coffee. "What time will you be back? I was thinking of making your favorite pot roast for dinner." "Should be back by 6 or so." He closed his laptop. "Hey, have you had a chance to think more about what we discussed yesterday? The investment opportunity?" So direct. Not even a pretense that this visit was about spending time with me. "I have," I said carefully. "And I've decided I need more information before I can commit to anything. I'll be calling Brandon on Monday to get his input." Michael's face tightened. "Mom, I told you, this opportunity won't wait. The window closes on Wednesday. If you wait until Monday to call Brandon..." "Then wait for him to review everything and get back to you. It might be too late." "Then it will be too late," I said, meeting his gaze steadily. "I won't rush into an investment of this size, Michael. Not even for you. Especially not for you." "What's that supposed to mean?" His voice had an edge now. I set my coffee mug down with deliberate care. "It means that you show up here after not visiting me for 2 years, barely call except on major holidays, and suddenly want me to invest a small fortune in a real estate project I know nothing about. It means I find the timing suspicious." He stared at me, color rising in his cheeks. "Wow. So that's what you think of me? That I only came to see you for your money?" "Did you?" I asked quietly. "I can't believe this." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile floor. "I try to include you in a great opportunity, something that could benefit our whole family. And you accuse me of having ulterior motives." "Michael, please sit down. Let's talk about this calmly." "There's nothing to talk about." He was gathering his laptop, shoving it into his bag. "You've made it clear what you think of me. Your own son." "Michael, I have to go. My meeting got moved up." He wouldn't meet my eyes as he collected his things. "I'll get my overnight bag later. Don't wait up." Before I could respond, he was gone, the front door closing behind him with a decisive click. I stood in my kitchen, hands trembling, tears threatening. Part of me wanted to run after him, to apologize, to smooth things over the way I'd done so often when he was younger. But a stronger part held me back. This wasn't a childhood tantrum. This was an adult man attempting to manipulate his elderly mother. I picked up my phone and dialed Brandon Wong's number, pressing the call button before I could change my mind. To my surprise, he answered despite it being a Saturday. "Margaret," he said warmly. "How are you?" "Not well, Brandon," I admitted. "I need your help. My son is here visiting, and he's brought an investment opportunity that's setting off alarm bells for me. Is there any chance you could look into it? Today, if possible?" There was a brief pause, then, "Of course, Margaret. James was one of my first clients, and I promised him I'd look after you. Email me whatever information you have, and I'll call you back as soon as I've reviewed it." Relief washed over me. "Thank you, Brandon. I've only got a printed prospectus, but I'll take photos and send them." After sending Brandon the images and a detailed email explaining the situation, I tried to occupy myself with household tasks, but my mind kept returning to Michael's angry departure, replaying our conversation, wondering if I'd been too harsh, too suspicious. Was I pushing away the only family I had left? Around noon, my phone rang. Diane, Lisa's mother. I hesitated before answering, unsure if I wanted to be pulled deeper into whatever was happening with Michael's finances. "Hello, Diane," I said, trying to sound normal. "Margaret, hi. I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Not at all. Michael's out at a meeting." I settled onto my couch, steeling myself for what might come next. "A meeting? In Arizona?" She sounded confused. "That's what he said." I paused. "Deanne, your text worried me. What's going on with Michael and Lisa?" A long silence, then a deep sigh. "I was hoping you might know more than I do. Lisa's been evasive, but Richard and I are concerned. They put their Michigan lake house on the market suddenly last month, the one they just bought last summer. Emma got pulled out of her ballet academy, which she loved. And last week, when we were babysitting the kids, Jack mentioned something about Daddy being in trouble at work." My stomach dropped. "What kind of trouble?" "He didn't know specifics, he's only 8, but he said Mommy and Daddy had a big fight about it. And Daddy said everything would be fine once some money came through." "Once some money came through? Like the money from his mother's savings, perhaps?" "Diane, Michael's asking me to invest in a condominium development in Chicago. A substantial amount. Do you know anything about it?" Another pause. "Lisa mentioned something about Michael investing in real estate, but she seemed uncomfortable about it. Richard tried to ask questions. He was in commercial real estate for 40 years, you know, but Lisa changed the subject." "Did they ask you and Richard to invest?" I held my breath, waiting for her answer. "No," she said slowly, "which is odd now that you mention it. Richard would have been a natural investor for something like that, with his experience and connections." We talked for a few more minutes, sharing our concerns, promising to keep each other informed. By the time we hung up, my suspicions had hardened into certainty. Something was very wrong with Michael's finances, and very wrong with this investment opportunity. Brandon called back just after 3 o'clock. "Margaret," he said without preamble, "I strongly advise against this investment." Though I'd expected this answer, hearing it stated so definitively sent a chill through me. "What did you find?" "Several red flags. First, the projected returns are unrealistic for the current market. Second, I did some research on the developer, Westland Properties. They have several lawsuits pending from previous projects, claims of substandard materials, delays, misappropriation of funds. Third, and most concerning, they're not properly registered with the SEC for this type of offering." I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly weak. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means this isn't a legitimate investment opportunity, at least not how it's being presented. At best, it's a high-risk venture being marketed as a sure thing. At worst," he hesitated. "At worst," I prompted. "At worst, it could be fraudulent. A scheme to raise capital with no intention of completing the project as described, or of providing the promised returns." My hand tightened around the phone. "And if my son is involved in promoting this investment—" Brandon's voice was careful. "Professional. I can't speak to your son's knowledge or intentions, Margaret, but anyone directing potential investors to this opportunity is either misinformed about its nature or not being honest about the risks." After thanking Brandon and ending the call, I sat in silence, trying to process what I'd learned. My son, my only child, was either being deceived himself or actively trying to deceive me, his mother, into putting my financial security at risk. Neither possibility was easy to accept. The afternoon stretched endlessly as I waited for Michael's return. I tried reading, tried watching television, even tried napping, but my mind wouldn't quiet. By 6 o'clock, the time he'd said he'd be back, I'd worked myself into a state of anxious anticipation. But 6 came and went with no sign of him. At 6:30, I texted him, "Dinner will be ready at 7. Are you on your way?" No response. At 7:15, I called his cell. It went straight to voicemail. By 8:00, worry had begun to mix with my anger. What if something had happened to him? What if he'd been in an accident? I was about to call the local hospitals when my doorbell rang. I rushed to answer it, relief washing over me, only to find not Michael but a uniformed police officer standing on my doorstep. "Mrs. Wilson?" she asked, her expression serious. My heart stuttered. "Yes. Is this about my son? Has something happened to Michael?" She looked confused. "No, ma'am. I'm here about a fraud complaint. A Mr. Brandon Wong contacted our department with concerns about a potential investment scheme targeting elderly residents. He said you might have information relevant to our investigation." I stared at her, processing this unexpected development. "Brandon had called the police?" Yes, I suppose I do. Please, come in." For the next hour, I sat in my living room with Officer Martinez, detailing everything Michael had told me about the investment opportunity, showing her the prospectus, explaining my concerns. She took meticulous notes, asked clarifying questions, and treated me with a respect that I found both comforting and empowering. She didn't speak to me as if I were a confused old woman, but as a competent adult who might have valuable information. "You're not the first person to report this, Mrs. Wilson," she said as she prepared to leave. "We've received several complaints about Westland Properties and this particular development. It appears to be a sophisticated fraud operation targeting family members of professionals who have connections to potential investors." "My son is an attorney," I said quietly, "at a respected firm in Chicago." Officer Martinez's expression softened slightly. "Has your son been experiencing financial difficulties that you know of?" I hesitated, then shared what Diane had told me about the lake house, the ballet lessons, the overheard conversation. I think he may have invested his own money and lost it. And now he's trying to recoup his losses by bringing in more investors. She nodded. That's a common pattern in these cases. People get drawn in, lose money, then in desperation try to bring in friends and family, either because they've been promised their money back if they refer others, or because they genuinely believe the investment will still pay off if more capital is raised. After she left, promising to keep me informed about the investigation, I sat alone in my too-quiet house, waiting for Michael's return. The pot roast I'd prepared sat untouched in the oven, long since dried out and inedible. At 10:30, my phone finally buzzed with a text from Michael. Staying in Phoenix tonight. Meeting ran late. Have early meetings tomorrow too. Will come get my things in the afternoon. No apology for missing dinner. No explanation for his silence. Just a terse statement of plans that conveniently meant he wouldn't have to face me until the next day. I didn't respond. What was there to say? That I knew he was lying, that I'd reported the investment he was promoting to the police, that I was heartbroken by his betrayal. I went through the motions of getting ready for bed, washing my face, brushing my teeth, changing into my nightgown. But as I lay in the darkness, sleep eluded me. My mind churned with memories of Michael growing up, trying to pinpoint where things had gone wrong, when my loving son had become this stranger who saw his mother as a source of capital rather than a person deserving of respect and care. Sunday dawned bright and clear, but I felt anything but. I moved through my morning routine mechanically, waiting for Michael's return with a mixture of dread and determination. I'd spent much of the night thinking about what I would say to him, how I would confront him without driving him away completely, because despite everything, he was still my son. I still loved him, still hoped for reconciliation, but not at the cost of truce. Just after 2 p.m., the black rental car pulled into my driveway again. I watched from the window as Michael got out, his posture stiff, his movements deliberate. He didn't look like a man coming home to his mother. He looked like a businessman completing an unpleasant transaction. I opened the door before he could knock, just as I had upon his arrival 2 days ago. But this time, there was no pretense of joy, no embrace. We stood regarding each other across an invisible divide that felt wider than the Grand Canyon. "Michael," I said quietly. "I just came for my things," he replied, his voice flat. "I have a flight back to Chicago tonight. We need to talk first." He sighed, impatience evident in every line of his body. "Mom, I don't think there's anything to say. You've made your feelings clear." "No, I haven't, not nearly." I stepped back, holding the door wide. "Come in, please." Something in my tone must have reached him, because after a moment's hesitation, he walked past me into the living room. He remained standing, clearly intending this to be a brief encounter. "Sit down, Michael," I said, my voice firmer than I'd intended. "This isn't a quick goodbye." Surprise flickered across his face at my tone, but he complied, perching on the edge of the sofa just as he had during our first conversation. I took the armchair opposite him, folding my hands in my lap to keep them steady. "I spoke with Brandon Wong yesterday," I began. "He reviewed the investment materials you gave me." Michael's jaw tightened. "Mom, I told you, Brandon isn't a real estate expert." "He knows enough to recognize fraud when he sees it." The words hung in the air between us, sharp and irrevocable. Michael stared at me, color draining from his face. "What are you talking about?" "Westland Properties, the lawsuits, the SEC violations. Brandon found it all with a few hours of research." I leaned forward, holding his gaze. "Did you know, Michael? Did you know you were asking me to invest in a fraudulent scheme?" He looked away, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. It's not what you think." "Then explain it to me." I kept my voice level, though my heart was racing. "Tell me why my son, an attorney who should know better, is promoting an investment that could be prosecuted as securities fraud. His hands clenched into fists on his knees. I didn't know at first, I swear, Mom. One of the senior partners brought me in, said it was a fantastic opportunity. I invested myself, everything we had saved for the kids' college funds, the equity from the lake house. And you lost it all, I said softly. He nodded, still not meeting my eyes. When I realized things weren't right, it was too late. My money was gone. But they promised. They said if I brought in more investors, they'd make me whole again. Give me back what I'd put in, plus the promised returns. So you came to me. The hurt was a physical ache in my chest. Your mother, who you hadn't visited in 2 years, who you barely call. You came because you needed money. I came because I'm desperate. His voice broke, and for the first time, I saw past the polished exterior to the frightened man beneath. I've lost everything, Mom. The lake house, the kids' college funds. Lisa doesn't know the full extent of it yet, but when she finds out... He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father that it made my breath catch. I could lose my family, my career, if this gets out. I could be disbarred. I should have felt vindicated by his confession, but all I felt was a profound sadness. My son, who'd had every advantage, every opportunity, had risked it all on a get-rich-quick scheme, and then compounded his error by trying to drag others, including his own mother, down with him. I spoke with Diane yesterday, I said after a moment. She and Richard are worried about you and Lisa. About the children. Michael looked up sharply. You told them about this? No. They don't know the details, only that something seems wrong. But they deserve to know, Michael. Lisa deserves to know, and the police deserve to know. The police? His voice was barely audible. Brandon reported the investment scheme yesterday. An officer came to take my statement. He stared at me, horror dawning on his face. You reported me to the police? I reported the fraudulent investment opportunity, I corrected gently. I didn't name you as being knowingly involved, but Michael, you need to go to the authorities yourself. Tell them everything you know about Westland Properties. About the partners at your firm who brought you in. That's your only path forward. You don't understand what you're asking, he whispered. These people, they're not just fraudsters, Mom, they're dangerous. And if I talk, I'll be admitting my own guilt. I could go to prison. Or you could get immunity for cooperating. I reached across the space between us, taking his cold hands in mine. Michael, look at me. You've made terrible mistakes, but you're my son, and I love you. I will help you through this, but only if you do the right thing. Only if you stop running and face the consequences of your actions. For a long moment he just looked at me, his expression a complex mixture of fear, shame, and something else. Something that might have been the beginning of respect. Then he nodded almost imperceptibly. What do I do? He asked, sounding younger than I'd heard him in decades. First, you call Lisa. Tell her everything. She deserves that much. She'll leave me. She might, I acknowledged, might. But she might not. Give her the chance to stand by you, to help you make this right. And then? Then we call Officer Martinez together. You tell her everything you know, and you accept whatever comes next. The conversation with Lisa was as difficult as I'd expected. Michael used my phone to call her, putting it on speaker so I could be part of the discussion. At first she was incredulous, then angry, then tearful. But by the end of the hour-long call, she'd moved to a place of grim determination. I'm not saying I forgive you yet, she told Michael, her voice tight with controlled emotion. But I'm not abandoning you, either. We'll get through this somehow, for the kids' sake if nothing else. The call to Officer Martinez was even harder. Michael faltered several times as he detailed his involvement, naming the senior partners who had drawn him in, explaining the mechanics of the scheme, admitting his own complicity in trying to recruit more investors. Throughout, I sat beside him, a hand on his shoulder, offering silent support even as I grieved for the position he'd put himself in. By the time evening fell, Michael had given a formal statement at the police station, been interviewed by a detective, and spoken with a criminal attorney I'd insisted on calling. The lawyer, a referral from Brandon, had listened to Michael's story with a professionally neutral expression, and then outlined a path forward that involved full cooperation in exchange for potential leniency. "You did the right thing," I told Michael as we sat on my patio, watching the desert sunset. He'd missed his flight back to Chicago and would be staying another night, flying out the next morning to face whatever awaited him there. Did I? He looked exhausted, hollowed out. "It doesn't feel like it. It feels like I've ruined everything." "Not everything," I said firmly. "You've made a start at fixing what you broke. That counts for something." He was quiet for a long time, his eyes on the distant mountains. "I don't understand how you can still look at me," he said finally, "after what I tried to do to you." The question pierced me. How could I explain the complexity of maternal love? How it could encompass disappointment, anger, hurt, and still remain unbroken? "Because I'm your mother," I said simply. "That doesn't mean I excuse what you did. It doesn't mean there aren't consequences or that our relationship won't need rebuilding. But it does mean I don't stop loving you, even when you disappoint me deeply." "I'm sorry," he whispered. And for the first time since his arrival, I felt the words were genuinely meant. Not just for this weekend, but for everything. For not calling, for not visiting, for treating you like an afterthought until I needed something from you. I reached over and took his hand, feeling its weight and warmth in mine. "I know." As the last light faded from the sky, we sat in silence, mother and son, bound by blood and history and hurt and love. The road ahead would not be easy. Michael faced potential legal consequences, career repercussions, financial ruin. Our relationship had been damaged in ways that would take time and effort to repair. But as I sat beside my child under the vast Arizona sky, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel when this weekend began. Hope. Not the naive hope that everything would magically be fixed, but the mature hope that comes from choosing truth over lies, accountability over evasion, love over estrangement. Michael left the next morning with promises to call regularly, to bring Lisa and the children to visit as soon as possible, to be more present in my life, regardless of what the future held. I believed him, not because the words were new, but because they came from a place of newfound honesty. In the months that followed, Michael's cooperation with authorities led to the arrest of several key figures in the investment scheme. He lost his position at the law firm, but avoided disbarment by accepting a suspension and agreeing to ethics training. Lisa stood by him, though their marriage required intensive counseling to rebuild trust. They sold their 2-large house in Highland Park and moved to a modest home in a less prestigious suburb, beginning the long process of financial recovery. And me? I remained in my desert home, watching hummingbirds visit my cactus garden, having coffee with Eleanor, building a life that was mine alone yet increasingly included regular calls, video chats, and visits from my son and his family. The relationship between Michael and me was different now, more honest, more equal, tempered by the knowledge of how close we'd come to losing each other completely. On my 66th birthday, almost exactly a year after that fateful weekend visit, Michael and his family came to celebrate with me. As we sat around my dining table, Lisa helping Emma cut her cake, Jack showing me his latest robot design, Michael watching us all with a quiet contentment that was new to him, I caught my son's eye across the table. "Thank you," he mouthed silently. I smiled, understanding all that those 2 words encompassed. Thank you for not giving in. Thank you for reporting the scheme. Thank you for standing by me. Thank you for showing me the path back to integrity. Thank you for still being my mother after everything. You're welcome, I mouthed back, my heart full. Sometimes love means saying no to those we care about most. Sometimes the truest act of parenting isn't giving our children what they ask for, but what they truly need, even when that's accountability rather than money, truth rather than enabling, consequences rather than rescue. It had taken us both decades and a painful crisis to learn this lesson. But as I looked around at my family gathered in my little desert home, I knew it had been worth it. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.